I pulled into the driveway of the $1.2 million Victorian home I had spent years saving for. The sold sign was already staked deeply into the front lawn. Standing on the wraparound porch was my sister, Vanessa. She dangled a shiny new set of brass keys from her fingers. My parents flanked her on both sides, their faces stretched into smug, triumphant smiles. I rolled down my car window. Vanessa stepped to the edge of the steps. She looked down at me and laughed. She asked what a barren, single spinster needed with 5 bedrooms anyway. Mom and Dad helped her buy it. She said, because she actually had a real family that deserved the space. The truth snapped into focus. My own flesh and blood had bribed my trusted real estate agent to outbid me in secret. This was pure, calculated spite. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and put the car in reverse. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. But my mind was entirely clear. Before my tires even left their street, I drafted an email to the state real estate licensing board. I attached the time-stamped text messages from my agent, officially filing an ethics complaint for collusion. She would lose her license, and more importantly, she would lose the massive commission she thought she had secured. My family thought they had broken me. They thought I was just a 36-year-old public high school principal surviving on a state salary. They had absolutely no idea that 2 years ago, I coded and sold a proprietary educational scheduling software to a national school district network for $5 million. I kept my wealth entirely private. They wanted to play real estate warfare. I decided to change the scale of the battlefield. I called an exclusive high-end broker. I deployed my private holding company, Oak and Iron LLC, and initiated a pure cash purchase. 2 weeks later, moving day arrived. Vanessa was sipping coffee on her Victorian porch when the first fleet of luxury moving trucks rolled down the street. They bypassed her house entirely. They parked directly next door, at the wrought iron gates of the Hawthorne estate. A $3.5 million historic mansion that dwarfed her property in every conceivable way. I stood on the grand limestone steps of my new home, directing the movers. I instructed them to carry my grand piano into the ballroom. I glanced over the property line. Vanessa's coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on her porch. My parents stumbled out the front door, their faces draining of all color. They stared at the massive columns, the sprawling gardens, and the sheer undeniable reality of my success. They bought a spite house. I bought a castle. The silence lasted exactly 3 days. Vanessa simply could not handle being eclipsed. Her entitlement was a living, breathing parasite, and it was starving for attention. She marched across the shared property line, stomping up my limestone steps with her arms crossed. She demanded that I let her use my newly renovated ballroom for her child's upcoming birthday party. She actually looked me in the eye and said that since I had no husband and no children, the space was going to waste. She said family helps family. My jaw locked. The sheer audacity of her request echoed in my mind. 10 years ago, I sat at my parents' kitchen table, begging for a small loan to finish my master's degree. They laughed at me. They told me I was wasting my life on useless degrees and refused to give me a single dime. They starved me of support back then, but that exact starvation built the empire I was standing in today. I looked Vanessa dead in the eye. I told her the estate was closed to the public, and that included her. I closed the custom mahogany door right in her face. The war turned strictly professional. I registered the Hawthorne Estate's imported winter rose gardens to their 19th century botanical blueprints with the State Register of Historic Places. That single piece of paperwork elevated the property from a fancy house to a protected heritage site. Then, I began preparing for a massive charity gala. I invited the mayor, the local school board, and the city's elite. To meet municipal code for an event of this size, I hired off-duty police officers to manage security and patrol the grounds. Vanessa's jealousy rotted into sheer desperation. She tried to host a competing garden party at her Victorian on the exact same weekend. It was an expensive, humiliating failure that plunged her deep into credit card debt. Nobody cared about her house when the Hawthorne estate was right next door. She learned through the neighborhood gossip that the elite guests were attending my gala specifically to see the historic botanical gardens. In Vanessa's delusional mind, she formulated a plan. If my gardens were tragically ruined right before the event, I would be forced to move the VIP guests to her Victorian as an emergency backup venue. She wanted to steal the spotlight, and she was willing to commit a crime to get it. 2 nights before the gala, my security alerts pinged. Vanessa waited until a catering delivery truck idled near the main gate. Distracting the primary guards, she crept through the shadows along the property line. She used heavy bolt cutters to snap a rusted lock on an old, forgotten servant's gate connecting our 2 yards. She carried a heavy plastic jug of industrial bleach and a pair of steel shears. She thought she was a ghost. She thought she had outsmarted a high school principal. She forgot that I manage irrational, destructive behavior for a living. I anticipated that exact blind spot. I had explicitly instructed my security team to mount a covert infrared camera directly in the canopy above that servant's gate. The moment she unscrewed the cap of the bleach and raised it over the heritage roses, a perimeter motion sensor tripped. Searing white floodlights snapped on, bathing the garden in artificial daylight. 2 off-duty police officers sprinted around the corner. They shouted for her to drop the jug. Vanessa panicked. She dropped the bleach, but then her toxic instincts kicked in. She dropped to her knees and started screaming. A handful of early arriving VIP guests and elite neighbors rushed toward the commotion. Vanessa pointed a trembling finger at me as I walked out onto the terrace. She wailed to the crowd, sobbing hysterically. She claimed I lured her over here. She cried that I was attacking her, playing the ultimate victim to manipulate the wealthy onlookers. For a split second, the high society crowd looked at me with genuine suspicion. The false defeat hung in the cold night air. I bypassed the argument entirely. I walked calmly down the stone path, holding my tablet. I did not raise my voice. I handed the screen directly to the arresting officer and tapped play. The high-definition infrared footage played flawlessly. It showed Vanessa meticulously cutting the lock, sneaking onto the property, and preparing to poison the soil. The crowd leaned in. Their suspicion evaporated into absolute visceral disgust. Vanessa's face crumbled. The fake tears of manipulation vanished, replaced by the wide-eyed terror of a trapped animal. The heavy steel handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The metallic sound echoed against the brick walls. Arthur and Beatrice sprinted out of their Victorian in their bathrobes. They slammed against the wrought iron fence, completely powerless. They screamed for the officers to stop. But money and entitlement cannot unseal a closed trap. They watched their golden child get shoved into the back of a squad car. Her reputation pulverized in front of the exact social circle she desperately wanted to impress. The sun rose the next morning, casting long shadows over the neighborhood. Arthur and Beatrice stood on my front porch. Their eyes were bloodshot and swollen. The smug arrogance they wore on moving day was entirely gone. My father's hands shook as he begged me to call the police station. He pleaded with me to drop the charges, promising that Vanessa had learned her lesson. I looked at the people who had spent my entire life trying to make me feel small. I delivered the cold, legal reality. I told them I could not drop anything. Vandalizing state-registered historic property with damages exceeding $5,000 was not a petty family dispute. It was a Class D felony. The state was pressing charges, not me. I shut the door and locked the deadbolt. The financial fallout was swift and merciless. To keep Vanessa out of a state penitentiary, my parents had to hire an elite team of crisis defense attorneys and pay massive court-ordered civil restitution. They had already drained their savings to outbid me on the Victorian. To afford the six-figure legal bills, they took out a predatory, high-interest home equity line of credit against their house. They defaulted within 4 months. I stood on my rooftop garden, sipping a warm cup of coffee. I looked down at the driveway next door. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Arthur, Beatrice, and Vanessa were quietly loading boxes into a rented moving truck. They were fleeing the neighborhood in the dead of night, desperately trying to escape before the bank officially foreclosed on the property and posted the public eviction notice. The house they bought solely to spite me became the anchor that drowned them. 6 months passed. The dust settled, and the neighborhood returned to its quiet elegance. I was sitting in my library, reviewing grants for the school district, when my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. It was Vanessa. Her voice was thin and trembling. She said she was calling from a court-mandated facility. She said she was still my sister. She said she did it all because the family pressured her. She waited for me to reply, to offer a shred of comfort, or even to yell at her. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I felt absolutely nothing. I hit delete, permanently erasing the message. I blocked the number. Later that evening, my ballroom was filled with light and laughter. I hosted a dinner for my chosen family. My colleagues, my closest friends, and the mentors who had supported me when I had nothing. There was no competition in that room. There was no underlying malice. Just genuine respect and shared joy. Looking around that beautiful space, the chaos of my past felt like a lifetime away. If you have spent your life playing the role of the family punching bag, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Toxic people rely on your silence and your guilt. They build their confidence by standing on your neck. When you finally decide to stand up, they will call you the villain. Let them. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. And you owe absolutely nothing to the hands that held you down. Here are the 3 rules I learned from surviving the Spite House checkmate. Rule number 1. The myth of blood loyalty is a lie designed to keep you trapped. DNA is nothing more than a biological accident. Loyalty is a behavioral choice. Never, under any circumstances, let someone use the word family as a discount code for disrespect. If a stranger treated you the way your relatives do, you would have cut them off years ago. Apply that same standard to everyone. Rule number 2. Silence is a weapon. When toxic people try to provoke you, your anger is the exact currency they are trying to steal. They want you to blow up. They want you to look crazy so they can justify their abuse. When you stay completely silent, when you refuse to engage, and when you quietly succeed, you bankrupt them emotionally. You take away their power by simply refusing to play the game. Rule number 3, do not avenge. Outgrow. True karma is not about matching their cruelty. It is not about sinking to their level to get even. True karma is about building a life so vast, so protected, and so incredibly beautiful that their petty malice simply cannot reach over your walls. Success is not revenge. Success is freedom. I am Naomi, and I am finally free. If you are the black sheep of your family, I want you to ask yourself a hard question. Are you really the black sheep? Or are you just the only one who figured out how to escape the slaughterhouse? Tell me your story in the comments below. Protect your peace, draw your boundaries, and whatever you do, keep building. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why on earth did Naomi even let these people know what house she wanted? Why did she keep them in her life long enough to let them sabotage her in the first place? Let me break down the psychology of what actually happened here. Naomi was dealing with something called the slot machine effect. In psychology, it is known as intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up with narcissistic parents or a highly toxic sibling, they do not treat you terribly 100% of the time. If they did, you would just walk away. Instead, they give you tiny, unpredictable crumbs of hope, a fake smile, a pleasant holiday dinner, a moment where they actually pretend to care. It keeps you pulling the lever, praying that this time you finally hit the jackpot of their unconditional love. Naomi was not naive. She was just holding on to the hope that her family would finally support her dreams. But the moment they dangled those keys in her face, the illusion shattered. And that brings us to the street smart financial self-defense of this story. Naomi executed 3 massive moves that you need to memorize if you ever find yourself in the crosshairs of toxic people. First, the audit strategy. When her real estate agent betrayed her, Naomi did not just cry or send an angry text. She audited the betrayal. She gathered timestamp messages and immediately filed a formal ethics complaint to the state board. Scammers, narcissists, and their enablers thrive in the shadows. If someone breaches a professional contract to hurt you, do not argue. Drag their actions into the brutal light of compliance and paperwork. Hit their wallet. Second, the buyout. Naomi used a private limited liability company to purchase that $3.5 million estate. She weaponized financial stealth. She realized that trying to prove her worth to her parents was a bad investment. She did not just buy a historic mansion, she bought her absolute, undeniable freedom. Sometimes the highest return on investment you will ever make is the price you pay to permanently blindside the people trying to keep you down. Third, building the case. Look at the climax of the story. When Vanessa was screaming on the lawn, playing the ultimate victim in front of the elite crowd, Naomi did not yell back. She did not try to defend her character. She just pressed play on the high-definition infrared footage and let the off-duty police officers do their job. Narcissists will out-yell you every single time. Never argue with crazy. Build an airtight case. Set the trap. And let the undeniable evidence speak for you. Here is the final verdict. Your peace of mind is your most valuable asset. Stop giving massive emotional and financial discounts to people who disrespect you, just because you happen to share the same DNA. If you have ever had to financially or emotionally audit a toxic relationship to protect yourself, I want to hear your survival story in the comments right now. Hit that subscribe button for more real talk on protecting your wealth, your boundaries, and your mind. Stay sharp and keep building your empire.